Hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Happy time zone. I'm not even sure where you are or when you might be listening to it, as I'm recording it on the beginning of something different for me. Let me introduce myself. My name is Long-Fang. I am a long-term storyteller, dungeon master, game master, RPG enthusiast in general. I've been running games and playing in them for around 35 years and loving every minute of it. I suppose you could say it's been one of my life's passions. So, among those games, one of my favorites has always been Vampire the Masquerade, ever since I started playing it way back in the second edition. Most recently, about 15 months ago, I discovered and started playing and then running almost immediately the 5th edition of Vampire. And it is phenomenal. I mean, I thought that the 3rd edition was great. In fact, up until I got the books and started actually reading through the 5th edition, I was still running 3rd edition games as recently as a year and a half ago. I love the sophistication of the 5th edition. It's tightened up a lot of things and taken away some of the swinginess, and that just is amazing to me. However, having gotten a good bit of experience under my belt with the new edition, I wanted to run something different. And at least as of the time I'm recording this, there is no Dark Ages support for the 5th edition. There was for 3rd edition, and I absolutely consulted with some of that material before embarking on this. But this is basically, I'm going to talk at you, and I'm going to talk through my decisions on what to shift when starting a Dark Ages game, in case any of you are interested in the same kind of mechanics or just want to hear me talk. If you're that kind, go for it. I'm more than happy to talk. Let's start with basics. The game I decided to run, I'm calling it the Ashes of History, as you may have noticed as in the title of this. Ashes of History, in my conception, is going to be a game that touches lightly on history as it moves through it. I would like to be in a particular time for 3 to 5 sessions and then move on. Jump forward and do the same repeatedly as they move across time like a rock skipping over the surface of a pond. As to when, I wanted to give myself a good bit of leeway. I wanted to give them a real experience in time, so I went all the way back to 50 AD. I mean, this is the reign of Claudius, who was an emperor. People have different opinions on Claudius. I think he was the best of a bad bunch in that particular stretch, because there was Caligula, Claudius, and Nero all back to back to back. Yeah, that was a fun time for the Roman Empire. As far as location went, I gave my players of a choice. I said it could be one of 3 places. They could be in Rome, which would make them at the very heart of the empire, but they would be very little fish in a very, very big pond. Yes, there would be plenty of options for scheming and backbiting and trying to carve out little niches for their power, but in the end, London, we will get to London, but Rome was a city of over 1 million people at that time, with a standard vampire to mortal ratio of about 1 for every 10,000 to 1 for every 100,000. You're still talking about 10 on the most conservative side. We're not going with that. It's going to be closer to 100 vampires. And I've got 8 players, which I grant is a huge table. That is a lot of players. My ideal is closer to 6. But with the right players, I absolutely will run up to 8. And I think I've got a good bunch on this one. So, they could have chosen Rome. The second option I gave them, obviously, was London, as I just said. London was literally founded in 50 AD. Before that, there was a fort there. Standard Roman fort held a legion, which is 6,000 soldiers, 4,000 to 6,000. So there was somebody there. In this case, there was the vampire who was basically attached to the legion / feeding on it. His name is Justinian. In addition, there is another one of the PCs who I allowed it to be from that area a little bit longer for family reasons. It made sense. And I suppose that kind of gave away what they decided. They ended up going with London, which is a fantastic choice. But London, the settlement, only had 60,000 people, which means it should technically only support 6 vampires. So they're going to have to deal almost immediately with huge overcrowding issues, and the fact that the Masquerade will be fragile as hell. But it was a choice they made. The third option, which I thought was a great one, and they didn't opt for, was somewhere in the middle. Thracia had just been annexed by the Roman Empire a few years previously. It was a settled region. It would have been in modern-day Turkey on the northern shore. And it was newly annexed, so it was still struggling to find its place in the empire. It was a border region, and it was heavily enough populated that it could have easily supported people, the PCs. But it would have been fantastic for the options of political backbiting and carving out petty kingdoms and just all kinds of skullduggery. But that wasn't the way that they wanted to go. In the end, they decided that they would rather start with London and see where it went. I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to see it all the way to the end. Now, given that this is a game and therefore interactive, all art changes those who view upon it. It's just like science in that way. So, I do not necessarily expect that the game will maintain total consistency with the established timeline in the World of Darkness, because I allow my players agency. I do expect the larger events to do have an impact, but we aren't that far from already when something huge will be happening in Londinium. And if I know my players, they're going to try to find a way to stop it from happening, or at least getting as much control over the situation as possible. I love my players, but they can be chaos goblins. So we will really just have to see what ends up happening there. As for system changes, the Dark Ages, back in 3rd edition, it basically dropped the generational limits. So instead of starting at 13th generation, you started at 11th generation. Instead of all these things happening, you were basically a more powerful empire to start, which absolutely makes sense. All of my players are playing Childer. However, to reflect that change, they also will be starting at generation of 11th or 10th, and their blood potency is already going to start at 1 instead of a 0. That is a marked increase in power level, but it is reflective of what was going on in the Dark Ages. There really weren't even any caitiff until close to 1,000. I mean, there might have been some individuals that were older, but for the most part, caitiff were nearly unheard of until close to the millennial mark. The idea of the PCs being stronger or more capable is completely believable. Obviously, when we're moving from a modern setting to a more historical one, there are a few changes that we've had to make. For example, drive, as it currently stands, is kind of useless. There is no cars. So Instead, drive is ride. Firearms, again, not really effective. So firearms refers to projectile weapons. So if you are shooting a bow, then yes, you are using quote-unquote firearms. Really, it's archery right now. Technology. Technology is a fuzzy one because there isn't really technology so much right now. Technology really refers more to things like engineering processes and chemicals that they might have been using back then. It was more about the medieval, pre-medieval even, technologies. And so technology is always based upon when they are in the timeline, just like medicine is. Medicine at this time, yes, they knew some about how the human body worked. In fact, this is right after one of the burnings of the Library of Alexandria, and one of my players is going with a doctor type character. But medicine also involves a lot of information about what they believed back then for leeching and things like that. Hearth wisdom, not as much of the scientific and a lot more of the superstitious. That is where we fell on that. Obviously, anything else that we're dealing with on a case-by-case banner, we just have to deal with. That's where I fall pretty much as to pregame. The setting, as I said, there's Londinium, 60,000 people, 6,000 of those are soldiers. Justinian is still there, so Justinian will be the oldest vampire in the city, because everyone else is a childer. That means they're 15 years or younger. We will see during the first session just how they establish themselves and what the pecking order falls out as. I'm excited to see it, and I hope you are too, as we take this little experiment together. Until next time, stay hungry.